Your document, the cashier's sharp voice made Bella Stone look up. The man behind the counter, thin, with tired eyes, didn't even try to hide his irritation. His badge read, James Lovell. I'd like to withdraw cash, Bella said calmly, handing him her card. James glanced at her, then slowly, almost deliberately, looked at her clothes, a regular sweater, jeans, no expensive accessories. His lips twisted into a slight smile. You'll need to confirm your identity. Passport or driver's license? Bella silently took out her driver's license. James took it, glanced over it, and suddenly frowned. You need one more form of identification. Bella raised an eyebrow. Is this a joke? These are the rules, he replied curtly, handing back the ID. Well, that's odd. Because just now, the gentleman in the suit, she nodded toward the man by the exit, got his money without any additional checks. James clenched his jaw. You can go to another bank if you're not satisfied. Great advice, especially considering that I'm the CEO of this bank. The cashier froze. Conversations around them stopped, and the room fell silent. You. What? James' voice cracked. Bella calmly crossed her arms over her chest. And now, Mr. Lovell, I want to hear all about your rules. This is a misunderstanding, James laughed, but there was no humor in his eyes. You're joking, right? Bella didn't change her expression. She just stared at him, calmly and focused, like a predator who had already decided when to strike. Do you find this funny? James swallowed, trying to hide his sudden nervousness. Well, you don't look like. He stopped, realizing he'd said too much. Bella's eyes narrowed. Don't look like what? Her voice was even, but there was a sharp iciness in it. James started nervously tapping his fingers on the counter. Bank managers usually wear a different style of clothing. Interesting. Bella leaned slightly forward. And bank managers don't stand in line, do they? James tried to smile, but his lips twitched. I'm just following the rules, madam. Oh, now I'm madam. Bella raised an eyebrow sarcastically. James didn't reply. Tell me, Mr. Lovell. She paused, letting the silence stretch like a taut string. What made you think I don't deserve the same treatment as other clients? I don't. Or maybe I should help you. You look at me, and what do you see? James stumbled. It's a question. Come on, answer it. The room was deathly silent. Bank employees froze, and clients watched with interest. I'm just doing my job, James muttered finally, avoiding her gaze. Yes, and part of your job is humiliating clients who, in your opinion, don't fit your idea of an account holder? James opened his mouth to argue, but at that moment, a security guard appeared. Everything okay? He stopped his gaze on Bella, clearly assessing the situation unfavorably toward her. She's causing trouble, James quickly said, finding a chance to change the narrative. The security guard, a burly man in a black suit, frowned. Do you have documents? She just showed her driver's license, interjected the man in the suit who had been watching the scene. The security guard ignored him. I need another document. Bella took a deep breath. Do you understand that I can call my legal team right now? The security guard shook his head. We're just following protocol. Bella looked at James. He stood with his arms crossed, now not hiding his smug smile. Oh, I understand, Bella said. This is called protocol here. She took a step back and extended her hands. Then go ahead. Call the police. Let them hear about your protocol too. The security guard didn't move. He glanced at James, as if waiting for a command. The police have nothing to do with this, the cashier quickly said. If you have another document, just show it, and we'll resolve this quickly. Bella looked at him in a way that made him go silent. I've already shown you my ID. You have no right to ask for anything more. But you know what's interesting? Her voice was quiet, almost friendly, which made the situation even more tense. Why is it that none of the other clients have to go through this humiliation? It's a standard check, James said nervously. Really? Bella furrowed her brows. Because, as far as I can see, the man in that corner just withdrew a significant amount of cash, without any issues. Is that right? She looked at the man in the suit who had been watching the situation. He nodded. That's right. No one asked me for any additional documents. Are you joking? James muttered. No, the man said. Bella slowly turned back to the security guard. Do you have anything else to say? The security guard looked back at James. He began to blush. All right, he gave in. I was just trying to be careful. Careful? Bella smiled, but there was a cold edge in her eyes. Now imagine how quickly my lawyers will carefully review this situation. James gritted his teeth. This isn't necessary. You can withdraw the money. Bella paused, letting the tension linger in the air before taking the check and placing it on the counter. Nice try, Mr. Lovell. But now, I want to speak with your management. James turned pale. The security guard stepped back a pace. The bank lobby was frozen in anticipation. James swallowed hard. His gaze darted to the office doors, behind which the regional manager was sitting. You want to talk to management? His voice betrayed him, shaking slightly. Exactly, Bella replied evenly. And I won't leave until I do. James held his breath. Thoughts were spinning in his head. If she went into the office and met with Mr. Henderson now, it would be the end for him. No one would forgive him for causing a scandal, especially if it made the news. But if he just let her go? He felt dozens of eyes on him. People in the branch were not taking their eyes off this scene. Even the cashiers, who usually avoided interference, looked anxious. Mr. Lovell? Bella asked softly, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. James took a sharp step forward and blocked her way. You can't just walk into the manager's office without notice. His voice sounded harsh. Bella slowly tilted her head to the side, as if sizing him up. And this is coming from the person who just threatened me with the police due to their own prejudices? A barely audible whisper spread through the hall. A few customers began pulling out their phones, and James realized they were filming. This isn't how it seems. He nervously glanced around. Really? Bella crossed her arms. So why then did you detain me, but not check the other clients? Why did I receive this special attention? James opened his mouth, but didn't speak. I'm waiting. Her voice remained cold, with a hint of defiance. The security guard, who had remained silent until now, finally broke the silence. Maybe we should let her talk to Mr. Henderson? Are you serious? James hissed sharply. I don't want to be the one explaining why we denied a client access to her own money. The security guard shook his head, crossing his arms over his chest. James clenched his fists. Fine. He raised his hands. If you insist, go talk to management. But don't think it's going to change anything. Bella smiled. Oh, it will. More than you can imagine. She calmly stepped forward, and James stood frozen, feeling cold sweat trickling down his back. He didn't yet know that this was the beginning of his end. James stood frozen, watching Bella confidently walk down the hallway toward the regional manager's office door. His heart was pounding so loudly that he could barely hear the whispers of the cashiers. This is one hell of a story, someone muttered behind him. The phones in the customer's hands made his stomach tighten. This could turn into a disaster. If the video made it online, if Henderson decided to look into it. James made a sharp move and caught up to Bella, trying to block her way before she reached the door handle. This won't change anything, he hissed through clenched teeth. You think Henderson's going to listen to you? Bella calmly looked him in the eye. I don't think so. I know so. And before he could do anything, she firmly opened the door and walked inside. James felt his world shake. In Mr. Henderson's office, the regional manager looked up from his papers. What does this mean? His voice was low and threatening. Bella didn't stop. She walked up to his desk, placed her bag down, and coldly said, "I was detained at the branch, humiliated in front of dozens of customers, and threatened with the police for no reason." Henderson sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Why?" "Ask Mr. Lovell." She nodded toward James, who was hesitantly standing by the door. "He immediately decided I was a fraud." Henderson turned his gaze toward him. "Is this true?" "Aye." James nervously looked around. "I was just following protocol." "You singled me out." Bella didn't back down. "Out of dozens of customers." Henderson rubbed his temples. "Mr. Lovell, take a seat." James swallowed. "But—" "Sit down." The coldness in the manager's voice made him obey. Bella sat down as well, calmly folding her arms. Henderson looked at her, then at James. "Do you have anything to say?" James swallowed the lump in his throat. He didn't know what was worse, these questions or the realization that his career was hanging by a thread. James felt his mouth dry. This was his last chance to fix everything, but the more he tried to find the right words, the more it seemed like the situation was slipping out of control. "You both understand that I value discipline," Henderson said, running his fingers through his hair. "But I can't let this become the norm." Bella didn't look away. "If discipline is more important than human dignity, I would advise you to reconsider your principles." The silence in the office became unbearably heavy. James felt every gaze, every movement exposing his weakness. He had to act, now or never. "Mr. Henderson." He started standing, but his voice sounded like a captain of a ship heading into a storm. "I admit my mistake. I was overwhelmed with fear when I saw this situation, but I had no right to interfere with our clients' personal lives. This is my responsibility, and I am ready to face any consequences." Henderson looked at him, then back at Bella. "If we resolve this matter without scandal, without conflict, what do you think? Can we settle this peacefully?" Bella didn't respond immediately, as if weighing each word. Finally, she slowly nodded. "If you punish me for speaking the truth, that will be another mistake. But if you acknowledge your part in this, I am willing to close this matter." No courts, no statements. Henderson sighed deeply. She was right. This wasn't just James' mistake, it was the mistake of his team, of himself. "Fine," he finally said. "We'll close this case. But James, if you want to keep working here, I expect you to learn to control your emotions in situations like this. You have to be an example for others." James felt a sense of relief, though it didn't mean he was forgiven. He truly had to change. "I will," he said quietly, keeping his gaze on Henderson. "I promise." Bella stood up, and her gaze met James's. There was no irritation in her eyes, only cold determination. "If that doesn't happen," she said, "I'll still find a way to make sure the truth is heard." Leaving the office, James remained standing. This wasn't the end, but it was already clear it was the beginning of his new fight for his place. He would learn from this, whether he had the strength to change. But one thing was clear, now he had no choice. James exited Henderson's office, feeling the weight of every step, yet at the same time, a new sense of determination. It was only a temporary victory, and there would be many more trials ahead. Still, one thought kept echoing in his mind. He had changed. And not just because he had managed to escape unscathed, but because he understood the most important thing. Behind every action, there is always a choice. And today, he made the right one. Bella walked beside him, her gaze never letting him feel at ease. She understood that James still had a long way to go, but he had taken the first step. She was ready to help, but only if he truly wanted it. Their paths crossed, but it was no accident. They were on two different shores, and she was left to decide whether to pull him to her side or let him find his own way. As they exited the building, James saw his colleagues discussing the recent events among themselves. They noticed the changes in his behavior. A few of them nodded, but no one approached him. He felt isolated, as always, but today he felt that he could no longer stay on the surface. "You didn't break," Bella said, stopping beside him. Her words were like a gentle nudge toward change. "No, I didn't break," he replied. "I just realized that this is my chance to be who I was always meant to be." When the doors of the building closed behind them, James realized that this moment had become the beginning he had been searching for all along. Now he was ready to change not only himself, but everything around him.